Pierce said as we passed by. He thinks he heard more footsteps. I heard them too. Standing next to Ronnie, I could make out a new pair of feet trampling the leaves in the dark. It was louder than the girl had been, probably bigger. "Show yourself," Ronnie shouted again. "We are armed." To my surprise, a woman answered him. She laughed and said, "Don't shoot, just a hiker." We moved back and watched her step into the clearing. She was probably in her late 30s and wore a raggedy hat and an old beat-up pack. I remember hearing Pierce grumble something like, "Real private spot you found here, Ronnie." And I agreed. "How the fuck were all these people bumping into us way out here?" The woman introduced herself as Sarah and apologized for scaring us. Ronnie demanded to know what she was doing out here, and she explained that she'd done the full-day loop around the mountain but got lost for a while. She claimed to have found her bearings and now knew where she was going. "You know the way back," he repeated to her. "Yep." "In the dark, without a flashlight." I know this area pretty well." Ronnie wasn't buying a word of it. He turned back to the rest of us and said, "We're getting cased, you guys. We're about to get robbed soon as we fall asleep. Campers get killed by thieves and meth heads all the time." "Well, thanks for bringing us out here, dingus," Jeff said. Sarah laughed again. She was real smiley for a woman lost in the woods. "In the dark. I swear it's nothing like that," she said. "Look, I'll be on my way." For whatever reason, I felt the urge to press her further. So I said, "You know, you're not the only person we've met out here who's walking around without a light." That fake little smile fell off Sarah's face, and it took the wind right out of my sails. She stared at me like she could see down into the deepest places inside me. "You met the little girl?" she asked with a blank expression. My bandmates all exchanged looks of incredulity. Sarah collected herself, and a new smile spread across her face. She said, "Don't listen to anything that little brat says. She's a liar through and through. Look, why don't you guys hike down to the ranger station with me? It'll be safer together." She pointed behind herself into the woods. Something lit up in my brain. This was the second time a stranger had tried to coax us into the dark. We weren't going to get robbed. Something much worse was about to happen. Pierce seemed to have come to the same conclusion, and he invited Sarah to instead join us around the fire. As he did with the little girl, he knew Sarah would decline. The strange woman told us she had to get back before it got any colder. And with that, she turned and hurried into the woods. After a long debate about what to do, we decided that hiking back to the truck was the fastest way to get lost or killed. We hadn't used a trail and our phone batteries were low. Every time the wind blew, it set 1,000 trees groaning and shivering, which made it impossible to orient ourselves by sound. And it was so black that if I stared into the darkness long enough, I started having minor hallucinations as my brain tried to make sense of the void. So we kept the fire blazing and agreed to sleep in two-person shifts. Since Pierce and I were the soberest of the bunch, we agreed to stay up first. But only an hour into our watch, we started hearing the coughs and sputters of a little girl in the distance. I followed Pierce to the lake's edge, which lay about 30 yards from our camp. There we heard an eerie voice wafting on the breeze. I saw the silhouette of a person milling about near the water a few hundred feet away, and realized it was the girl. She was wandering around in the dark, singing. We booked it back to the fire and woke up Jeff and Ronnie, alerting them to the girl's presence. But as we discussed what to do, another voice erupted from nearby and began singing as well. It sounded just like Sarah. Pierce and I jumped into the tent with the other guys and sealed it up, terrified that the time had come for whatever these creeps had planned. But no one approached our camp. The two people just walked in slow half-circles behind the trees, singing together in a language I couldn't identify. Ronnie always keeps a menacing-looking trail knife on him when we go hiking, and he scrambled for it while shouting that he'd butcher anybody who came near us. His yelling caused the people outside to go quiet for a few moments. I pulled out my phone to record some of the voices, but my hands were shaking so hard I could barely operate it. I caught a bit of the girl, but then something even weirder happened. None of us are certain of how many people were in those woods, but we heard a third voice at that moment. It was deeper and guttural, like the sound of some night predator stalking around in a jungle. I'm not certain the noise was made by a person. Ronnie and Jeff believe the sound is coming from the girl, who has a coughing fit and then begins channeling some demonic voice. Pierce and I think it's a third person, or an animal that was with them, waiting for us to leave the safety of the bonfire. Here is a link to the recording. Sorry for the poor quality. I have a crappy phone. After the commotion, the activity in the woods died down for a while. The guys and I remained inside the tent, terrified, only leaving its shelter to throw more wood on the fire about once an hour. None of us slept, and for the rest of the night, we occasionally heard distant singing, laughing, coughing, and the occasional whisper. Sometimes the girl would say, "Can you help us?" in the exact same tone, as if her voice had been recorded and replayed over and over. We also heard someone, probably Sarah, climbing a nearby tree and shouting things like, "I see you boys," and "Let's go together. It's safe now," and that was it. By dawn, we were exhausted from terror and half frozen in the tent. The noises stopped, and the people, if they were people at all, had long abandoned their efforts to lure us into the dark. We packed up and hiked back to the truck, which had thankfully not been ransacked. As far as I'm concerned, the next time I go camping, it'll be in a treeless desert in Arizona, and I'll see if I can get Ronnie to post some of those night sky shots. I'm in a crappy band with some old high school buddies. A few weeks ago, our bassist, Pierce, informed the rest of the band that his parents had flown to Europe and left their house for us in Fort Collins. His dad is a sound engineer and has a recording studio in the house. We were ecstatic, so we packed light and made the drive from California to Fort Collins, ready to track a backlog of 8 songs we'd been sitting on. It was mid-spring, and the mountains looked like they were jutting from oceans of blue and yellow wildflowers. The drive was long, but it was nothing short of spectacular. In fact, it was so beautiful that one night after a recording session, Pierce suggested we go camping. I laughed at the idea. They all knew I'd had a somewhat negative experience in the Colorado Rockies a few years ago, but Ronnie and Jeff jumped on board and insisted I not be a wet blanket about it. Pierce recommended some vanilla tent camping at the foot of the mountain, but Ronnie had a bright idea. He wanted to do some astrophotography, and for that, he said, "We need to go to a place that's really dark." So he spent some time Googling and discovered Comanche Peak Wilderness, a remote section of a popular national park. What a great idea. I remember chirping, "Why, surely nothing could go wrong." Of course, shit did go wrong, and it started on the drive up there. People always forget that evening begins at around 3 p.m. in the deep woods. As soon as the sun dips behind the treetops, the gloom sets in and things get eerie. Nothing makes me more claustrophobic than the sight of that heavy murk sliding over the world. My body rejects it because my brain knows it's too early for dark. I was on edge the second the paved road gave way to dirt. The other thing people forget is just how loud the woods are at times and how silent they become at others. The contrast between them can make your head spin. One moment it's a symphony of owls and crickets and toads. Then a branch will snap or thunder will crack, and suddenly you're wondering if you've gone deaf. And then, of course, if you think about it too much, you realize just how full the darkness is with all those watchful eyes. We went in as deep as we could. We ditched Pierce's truck on the side of some forgotten road and hiked about a half-mile into the trees. There was no trail. We followed the GPS to a tiny lake nestled somewhere uphill, where Ronnie could set up his cameras and get a clear view of the sky. We hadn't crossed a solitary soul after entering the preserve a few hours prior, and I felt apprehensive about the fact that no one knew where we were. By dusk, we'd set up the 2 tents Pierce had borrowed from his parents. We made a small bonfire pit between them and strung all our food up in the trees like you're supposed to. Ronnie set up his cameras along the shore, and then we waited for nightfall. My anxiety worsened as darkness ate away at the sky. The guys didn't notice. They drank and smoked and carried on. And right when the world went black, leaves began to crunch in the distance behind our tents. A girl emerged from the tree line and stopped at the edge of our little clearing. This girl was probably 8 years old and wore a white dressing gown, like she'd just woken up. She had platinum blonde, almost white hair, and skin so pale she looked like a ghost in the firelight. She wasn't carrying a flashlight or anything. She'd been walking in pitch-black woods. She squinted at our fire as if it annoyed her and let out a few wet coughs. We all just stared at each other in confusion while she studied us. There were no roads or trails in this area. This was not a campground. Her presence made no sense. Jeff eventually called out to her, asking if she was okay, and she replied, "My mom's sick. Can you guys come help us?" Where is she?" Jeff asked. The girl just pointed into the forest. The trees and shadows and mist clustered together to form a great big wall of nope. I gave Jeff a subtle "fuck no" headshake. I might be a coward, but I'm not about to get disappeared by some malevolent wood pixie. Ronnie stood up and asked the girl if they were camping or if they had a house or what. The girl just said, "She's really sick. Just follow me." She started coughing again. At this point, all four of us could sense that something was wrong. Pierce, probably the cleverest of us, invited the girl to come warm up by the fire and explain what was going on. I think he knew she'd decline. The girl just turned and walked back into the woods, coughing as she went. Before she vanished, she turned around and said something, but we couldn't be certain of what. I heard, "So you'll be a liar," but Ronnie heard, "Soon you'll meet the liar." We built the fire up a lot more, mostly to keep a good perimeter against the darkness. All of us were creeped out, but after a few hours the guys had mostly forgotten about the girl. They laughed and told stories about drunken escapades. At some point, Jeff and I went to the tree line to take a piss. I walked about 10 steps into the woods and blasted the dark with my flashlight, Jeff following closely behind. I wanted to see if there was a clearing on the other side, or a footpath the girl might have followed. But there was nothing, just a snarl of impossible trees. We heard Ronnie shouting something, so we jogged back to the fire and saw him examining the southern edge of the clearing. That was the direction we'd left the truck in. I was a camp counselor over the summer. 3 days into the camp, we took the kids on a nighttime hiking trip into a nearby forested hill. There were 5 of us counselors and 15 kids, all around 12, 14 years old. We'd only hiked for about an hour before coming across a clearing and setting up the fire. While it had gotten dark, the forest wasn't exactly daunting. Safe to say, it was looking to be a pretty uneventful night. I should note that at one point during the hike, one of the counselors, Mike, went to go take a piss in the trees, coming back about 2 minutes later. The only peculiar thing about this occurrence was that he went relatively deep into the woods, probably further than he really needed to. He probably just wanted to make sure that he was absolutely out of sight beforehand. This will be important. As we started cooking up some s'mores, the counselors and campers began telling spooky stories. None of them really stood out. That was until Mike began telling his. "All right, I've got a good one," he said. "So a group of counselors and campers go hiking one night at a summer camp." I rolled my eyes. He was going for that angle, but the kids seemed invested in it, so I just silently listened on. "They go up a small hill," Mike continued, "and then they sit down at a clearing and begin telling campfire stories. Everything seemed normal until one story was interrupted by a sound in the woods." He paused for a second, and right on cue, there was a rustle in some nearby trees. "Okay," I thought. That was slightly clever. The kids seemed extremely tensed by this, but some of the other counselors were smiling, so I assumed they were in on it. So one of the counselors gets up to go check it out. He then gestured to one of the female counselors, Amy. For a second, Amy looked confused, but Mike just gestured again. Eventually she took the hint and got up, going towards where the sound occurred. She came back moments later, only to report that there was nothing. She still seemed confused, which caused me to question if she was really in on it or not. Mike went on. When the counselor came back, she said there was nothing there. But she was wrong, Mike smiled, although it was a weird one. Something subtly frightening about it. I could sense some genuine fear creeping up on some of the kids' faces as well. There was a tension in the air, Mike went on. Everybody could feel it, but nobody could describe it. I'm not sure if it was just a mental thing, but my skin prickled when he said this. The air around us did indeed feel like it had changed in some inexplicable way. Everybody else looked like they were experiencing something similar, all wrought with faces of discomfort. Another sound came from the woods, he said. This time it was laughter, as unnatural as laughter could get. I nearly had a heart attack when it came from right behind me. Everybody sat still, all too afraid to look. And then they realized something. One of the kids was missing. That was the last straw for Andy, another counselor who stood up. Mike, what the hell is this? Mike didn't respond. Andy scanned the kids and went white. Somebody count 'em. We did as he asked, counting 14 kids in total. 14. Oh, shit, Andy said. What happened? I don't know, Claire, another counselor, spoke up. I swear we were keeping an eye on them the entire time. Andy turned to look at Mike. What the fuck is going on, Mike? Mike smiled before continuing his story. During the chaos, they heard footsteps coming from everywhere. Suddenly, a cacophony of heavy stomps began sounding from every direction. Jesus! Claire shouted. Mike, this is too far! Andy shouted at him. The kids had begun huddling together, fear plastered across their faces. Mike's face suddenly became serious. One of the kids was suddenly dragged into the woods, and Andy went to go chase after them. We heard a scream, and I turned around just in time to see one of the campers disappearing into the forest. I couldn't make out who or what had done it, though. Fuck! Andy yelled out before going after him. Mike let out a cold laugh, but Andy wouldn't get so lucky. Before I could do anything, Amy went after Andy as well. They were dating, leaving Claire and I alone with Mike. I got up, storming over to him and punching him square in the jaw. For some reason, I thought that if I could get him to stop talking, all the shit that was going on would stop as well. Now, I'd say that I'm a pretty strong guy, and I'd put just about everything I had into that punch. But Mike barely reacted to it, even though the strike stung my own hand like hell. Mike glanced up at me, his face still stuck in that obscure grin. The last two counselors. I turned the other way before he finished the sentence, rounding up the remaining campers and telling them to make a beeline out of there. Claire followed suit, and we began booking it out of the forest. We couldn't hear Mike, or whatever, following us, so I let myself breathe a bit. Still, I knew that this was going to be hard to explain once we got back. At some point, we saw a figure wandering out of the woods. I stopped in my tracks, not really knowing what to do. The figure groaned as it meandered its way into the moonlight. It was Mike? The actual Mike, I guess. His clothes were torn and his head was bleeding. His chest was also exposed, with what looked like some strange symbol carved into it. I don't remember exactly what it looked like. He looked up at us, before asking, "What happened?" in a shaky voice. Before I could respond, he passed out. I began running over to him, but stopped when I heard Claire scream. I turned around to see another camper being dragged into the woods. "Fuck it," I muttered to myself, before yelling at the rest of them to keep going. We left Mike before bolting it the hell out of there. There was some more commotion behind us as we ran, with kids being dragged into the surrounding woods left and right. It couldn't have been helped. At a point, I could hear faint cackling coming from somewhere indistinct, but I knew who it was coming from. When we finally made it down the hill, my lungs were about to collapse. I looked back, seeing that there was one only remaining camper, plus Claire left. Both exhausted and having the blood drained from our faces, we simply stared at each other. And then the kid began smiling. The counselors had escaped, but that wasn't the end of their story, he said, in the same tone of voice that the fake Mike had been using. Upon hearing that, I lost it and began running, against my body's pleas to rest. I heard Claire once again screaming from behind me, but again, it couldn't be helped. When I got back to the main camp, I entered my cabin to see if my supervisor was there. He wasn't. I was about to go looking for him, but I was so tired that I had rest first. I made my way over to the bed and plopped down, planning on simply staying there for a few minutes. But when I woke up, there was sunlight bleeding in through the curtains. Somebody was shaking me awake. It was Blake, my supervisor. "Come on, man, get up. Time for breakfast. Go shower first, though, jeez." "Wait," I said to him. "I have to tell you something." "Tell me after you shower," he said before leaving. I got up and chased him into the dining hall. What I saw there made me freeze. All the counselors and campers that had been on the hike. They were all there. Blake turned to face me. "What did you want to talk about? And where's Mike?" I quickly scanned for Mike. I hadn't noticed that he wasn't there the first time. As I began stammering for an answer, the fake campers and counselors all turned to face me simultaneously. That left me at a complete loss for words. I ran out of there, got straight into my car and floored it. I didn't let myself breathe until I got back on the highway. I didn't want to think about the aftermath, about the implications of leaving a situation like this. I reached into my glove compartment for a pack of smokes, but I felt my hand touch something that wasn't there before. It was a tape recorder. I pulled it out, and against my better judgment, pressed play. A grainy, familiar voice began oozing out of the device. The last counselor thought that he'd gotten away, but little did he know, our paths would soon cross again. If you've been around here for a while, you might be aware of Goat Valley Campgrounds and its manager, Kate, who is trying her best to be a good person, and I respect her for that. Also, she could easily take me in a fight, and I'm a little afraid of her, but overall, I really like her as a person. My dog likes her too. Granted, he likes just about everyone, but he absolutely adores Kate. I've been thinking about visiting again, especially since that whole incident with the Fomorian. My heart still aches for Brian after he lost his dogs. I know how he must feel. If anything happened to my dog, it would kill me. I mean that in a very literal sense. My dog and I have this weird connection that is the absolute worst. That's actually why I booked a spot at Kate's campground last summer. I was able to talk to her when things were relatively calm at the campground. I'm a very awkward person to begin with, and my upbringing didn't exactly help me develop my near non-existent social skills. So I didn't tell her I was here with my weird dog until I dropped off a note at her house, asking if I could speak with her and maybe get some advice about supernatural beings. Then I realized that while I'd given her my name, I hadn't told her where I was staying or what my tent looked like, or even that I had an adolescent English black lab with me, and I didn't know if I should go back to the house or leave another note or call the number in the campground info packet. And now there were other dogs barreling up to us, and I didn't know whose dogs they were, and what if they got in a fight with my dog? "Are you Bobby?" My heart nearly stopped in my chest as I heard her voice. Was that her? Was that Kate? Was she the one who'd brought the dogs here? Were those Brian's dogs? I think I forgot how to speak for a while. I was too busy staring at the dogs that were now happily greeting my own dog. I didn't know what was going on. How had Kate found me so quickly? Then I remembered that Brian's dogs were expert trackers, and I wasn't exactly trying to hide from anyone. At least, not anyone at the campground. I kept my eyes on my dog, trying to pretend I was watching him and not keeping my eyes averted out of sheer embarrassment. Yeah, sorry. I forgot to mention where you could find me. I hope you didn't waste too much time looking for me. Kate kinda just looked at me for a moment. No, not really. One of my staff saw you drop that note off, and the dogs were pretty interested in the scent. You left on it, so I just followed them here. I could feel my face turning red, and for a brief moment I hoped the thing in the dark would pop out from the trees and swallow me up. My dog, in the meantime, was having the time of his life with Brian's dogs. I don't think Kate knew how to handle the situation. I can't blame her. I was an expert at making things awkward, and I didn't know how to proceed. I think she took pity on me, though, as she let out a heavy sigh and told me to come up to the house. I was able to regain a bit of composure as we walked, and we chatted a bit about my dog and my campsite. I've had plenty of experience with camping, and I'm proud to say that my little campsite complied with every single rule in the pamphlet, and then some. My dog is exceptionally well trained, too, and I think Kate noticed because at one point she even complimented me on his behavior. By the time we got to the front porch, I had regained most of my composure and was ready to talk about why I had come here. "So, you found my posts on Reddit?" she asked as she gestured to an empty chair. "Yeah, I've been looking for some information about my, situation, and your posts kinda stuck out to me," I admitted. "What exactly is your situation?" I looked down at my dog, who took that moment to rest his head on my knee. "Well, it's kind of hard to explain, but I've had this connection with my dog since, well, probably since the day we met. And now that things have finally started settling down for us, I figured now was as good a time as any to see if I could find some answers. What kind of connection? I hesitated, then reached into my pocket and pulled out a knife. It might be easier if I just showed you. Keep an eye on this spot right here, okay? To her credit, Kate was not at all shaken when I made the tiniest of cuts on my dog's front leg, and my arm started bleeding. Nor, thankfully, was my dog. And just to be absolutely clear, I do not make it a habit to cut my dog. I absolutely hate doing it, and I immediately apologized to him and gave him 1,000 kisses. He didn't even seem to notice the cut, but he definitely loved all the extra attention I was giving him. So, if your dog gets hurt, it transfers to you? Kate asked. It doesn't transfer exactly, it just, whatever happens to him happens to me, and whatever happens to me happens to him, I explained. And it's not just that he's also, well, kind of immortal, I guess. What do you mean, kind of immortal? Well, it's not like he can't die. Or maybe he can't, but I don't exactly want to try to kill him to find out. But like, he doesn't age. He's been a puppy since I was 12, and he's barely changed since then. They even did a bunch of DNA tests and stuff, and couldn't find any signs of age-related decay or anything that would explain it. Who's they? I felt the red creeping back into my face. Oh, the people who kidnapped me and held me prisoner for 5 years after I found Mr. Puppers in the woods and tried to run away with him. They were going to kill me, but they couldn't hurt me without hurting Mr. Puppers, and since they wanted the dog alive... I shrugged. Kate was frowning. I could tell she had a lot she wanted to say, but she simply said, 5 years? Why'd they let you go? They didn't. I broke out with Mr. Puppers and ran away, and we've been living in hiding ever since. I was keeping my eyes on Mr. Puppers this whole time, but I glanced up at Kate. She was giving me that look, the one where, you know, under the other eye I felt a chill go down my spine. So you found an immortal dog, formed a supernatural connection with him, got kidnapped and experimented on for 5 years, then escaped, lived in hiding, and then just decided to bring him to a campground on old land without telling me beforehand. I shrank back in my chair. I'm sorry. I was going to reach out to you, but I didn't want to say anything about him online, and then I was going to call, but I kept putting it off, and then it was too late, and I was here, and... Okay, I get it. Calm down, it's fine. Are you sure? I mean, we can leave, if that's better. No, it's fine. We've had worse pass through here, and I'd rather deal with this than those college kids who trashed their campsite and tried to troll the hammock monster. Is that actually a thing that happened? Kate's face was grim. We have about 50 more hammocks in our collection, thanks to those assholes. What exactly were you hoping to learn here? I shrugged. I don't know. I've tried to research this on my own, but nothing really matches up. The closest I've come was reading about Brian's dogs, but they're actually like supernatural beings who have supernatural abilities and shit. And Mr. Puppers is the kind of dog who will eat his own shit if it's been out in the snow for long enough. You clearly don't know what Brian's had to pull out of his dogs' mouths, Kate replied. You don't need to tell me, I said. I can imagine. But the point is, this guy has no sixth sense. He doesn't have incredible strength or speed or anything unique about him besides the 2 things I've already mentioned. He's just him, you know? Kate nodded, then was quiet for a while. I sat and petted Mr. Puppers until he decided to wander over to Kate and put his head on her lap. She smiled a little as she scratched his ears. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll try to take a look at our records and maybe ask around a bit. In the meantime, I'll have Brian come talk to you. He might not be able to help you, but if nothing else, at least you two can swap stories and commiserate on your experiences as immortal dog owners. Thank you, I said as we both stood. I was about to put Mr. Puppers back on his leash when I noticed someone approaching. I had never seen them before in my life, but I knew exactly who it was, and I was instantly afraid. You see, I knew how to respond if the man with the skull cup offered me a drink, but I didn't know how he would respond if I slipped up and called him Sippy Cup Bay. And I was completely, utterly convinced that I was going to do exactly that. I don't remember how exactly the conversation went. I know Kate asked Beau, who didn't have his name yet at that point, what he was doing here, and he gave a vague non-answer in reply. And then he looked at me and asked me if I was thirsty. This is the one time I was glad that I'd been imprisoned by an immortality-obsessed asshole who flipped his shit at the drop of a hat. Because if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to navigate conversations with people who would have no qualms about killing me if I say the wrong thing. I still don't recommend that anyone say what I said next, though, because it was kind of stupid. Before I answer that, can I ask you something? Bo's face was inscrutable, but Kate was giving me that look again. You know, the one actually, it was more like oh. But I think she wasn't as concerned about me as she was about the mess she'd have to clean up. Bo nodded. I glanced at my dog and took a deep breath. If I drink that, well, my dog, I know of your connection. Oh, cool, okay. Well, I'm not saying no, but, well, would he be okay? My dog, I mean, I couldn't see Kate's face, but I could feel the tith emanating from behind me and somewhere to my right. Bo didn't respond, though, at least not directly. He just leaned down and gave Mr. Puppers some scritches. I couldn't believe my eyes. I don't think Kate could believe hers either. You will not find the answers you seek here, he said. The one who did this to you will not reveal themselves for some time, so you might as well move on with your life. The one who did this to me? What do you mean? Bo gave me a look. Not the look, but one that told me I needed to shut my mouth and keep it shut. He glanced at Kate, then turned around and walked off. She and I stood in silence for a while as we watched him go. How the fuck are you not dead? She asked once he was out of sight. He never technically asked me to take a sip, was all I could manage in reply. More silence. Then, that asshole was just testing you. Yeah, I think you're right. A few more minutes of silence. Sunset was approaching, so I knew Kate would have to go inside soon. I was about to say my goodbyes and leave when she spoke again. What are you going to do now? I shrugged. Guess I'll head back to Colorado and keep doing construction work. You want a job here? Now it was my turn to give a look, but mine was mostly just sheer bafflement. What, really? Why not? You know a lot about camping. You're polite and considerate. And most importantly, you know how to follow the rules. That's more than I can say for some of the people I've hired. I'll be honest, I was absolutely thrilled to hear that from Kate. It felt like I'd accomplished something, even though all I did was follow common-sense camping practices and act like a decent human being. I did wonder if she had ulterior motives for offering, however, especially since Mr. Puppers was giving her a whole lot of his awkward but adorable adolescent puppy affection. I don't know. I need to think about it. That's fine. Stop by tomorrow and we can talk about it then. I went back to my tent with Mr. Puppers in tow and a bounce in my step. Sure, it had been uncomfortable and a little awkward, but that conversation had taken a huge weight off my shoulders. Finally, there was someone out there who knew about me and Mr. Puppers. Someone who understood what I was dealing with. Someone who didn't want me dead or strapped to an examination table. After hiding for so long, it was a wonderful feeling to finally be able to share my story. I did consider the offer. I thought about it as I made myself some dinner and played with my dog and socialized with some of the other campers. I thought long and hard about it, and I wanted to say yes. In fact, I would have said yes if it hadn't been for what happened that night. I read the rules. I knew what could happen. I knew I could follow the rules if something happened. I was confident when I went to bed. I wasn't nearly so confident when I woke up to a strange sound around midnight. I didn't want to attract any attention to myself, so I grabbed my miniature flashlight and pulled it into my sleeping bag. I'm not sure what my thought process was, but it didn't matter because that little flashlight wasn't working. It was working fine when I went to bed. I knew it was the thing in the dark. I knew it deep down in my soul. So I followed the rules. I stayed in my tent. I tried to sleep, and I waited for light to return. My flashlight turned on again after a while, so in theory I could relax again, but I went and had a panic attack instead. It was a pretty bad one, so I scrambled to find my meds and water and take them with only a tiny flashlight to aid me. I found my meds, and I thought I found my water, but when I downed the pill and took a swig to wash it down, I realized I had made a very horrible mistake. Kate, if you're reading this, I apologize. When you came by the next day and found a horrible mess where my once pristine campsite had been, it wasn't because Mr. Puppers had eaten something dead and rotten and gotten sick. That mess of vomit, both human and dog, that coated the inside of my tent, that was a result of me drinking my sunscreen at 2 a.m. like a dumbass and, instead of calling someone for help or going outside and inducing vomiting, trying to solve the problem by doing even more dumb things. I'm sorry you had to help me clean that, and I'm sorry about the diarrhea. Although, to be fair, I'm pretty sure that was a result of something Mr. Puppers ate. Also, I'm sorry I didn't stick around to explain anything and that I didn't ever contact you again because I was too embarrassed about what happened. I wanted to work for you, Kate, but I am a very anxious individual, and I don't always think clearly when I'm panicking. Believe me when I say that I would not have lasted long in the job, although something tells me you probably figured that one out for yourself. There was a bundle of papers wadded in a deep pocket of the backpack, but I didn't notice until after I got it home. I went back to the house where the estate sale was held, and a young woman answered the door. She couldn't say who the backpack belonged to and had no interest in the papers. Her grandmother was the one who died, of old age, natural causes. Apparently she was a bit of a hoarder, so I don't know if I'll ever be able to track down the source. The handwriting is tiny and the pages are damaged. I'll transcribe as faithfully as I can. September 5th. The man on the trail is dead and will need to be moved. It is a more difficult task than I would have guessed, and nearly impossible for a 5'4" woman with no help and no gurney. I tried to drag him toward camp right after I found him this morning, but only succeeded in pivoting him and twisting his legs around each other horribly. Bodies look so wrong once they stop feeling pain. I never thought I would have so much experience with death. But I haven't cried over the loss of someone since the lighthouse. This man shit his pants before he died, and moving him made the smell worse. It will bring the animals in. Still no sign of Ira or Bill. September 6th, I used Ira's foam sleeping mat like a sled to move the dead man. It still took me an hour to drag him 30 yards, and now the mat is so torn up that I'm questioning whether it was worth the effort. Gary Law. His driver's license is in his wallet. He's from Utah. I took the sight of him as a good sign at first. Another human on the trail might have meant we were close to civilization, but now I'm not sure what he was doing out here or what it means. I can't tell what killed him. No claw marks, no wounds on his hands. He's stoutly built, but with a bagginess about his physique that makes me think he was starving. He died with his mouth open, every mucous membrane turned ash gray. I don't think he was attacked. It's a relief. If he had been missing pieces, the logical thing to do would have been to move camp, but then Ira and Bill would have come back to nothing. I'm more afraid of being separated from them than I am of anything else. Still waiting on them both. September 8th, I spent all day yesterday stripping and burying Gary Law. He was shorter in stature, but his clothes should fit Bill well enough. His feet were small, so I'm keeping the socks for myself. They're almost brand new, thick blue wool. I can tell he wasn't an outdoorsman. Everything else was new too. New shoelaces, new cross trainers, new windbreaker. None of it quite right for someone trekking this far out. And the pants are from Banana Republic, pleated and with a neat sheen. These aren't pristine like everything else, and were hemmed by a tailor. I washed them in the creek, but they still smell like shit and death. Everything does, actually, to the point that I think the smell might be on me. In me. I weighted the pants down on a stone near the ridge that gets full sun. I miss bleach. I put green boughs on the signal fire today, but there was no answering smoke. I'm more worried about Ira than I am about Bill. It was Bill who found this trail to begin with. He always finds his way. September 9th Bill came back today. He took his time coming through the trees, and I got so scared I almost fired the gun. But he clapped, and I clapped back, and he called out to say he was injured. It was the loose shale on the hill between camp and the cave where Lillian was killed. He got caught in a slide and wound up buried to his hips, and 1 foot wedged between boulders. He couldn't get free until the rocks shifted again, which they did, that night, when a whistler came by. He's sure it didn't see him. He had to spend 2 days convalescing within sight of Lillian's cave before he was well enough to hike back. 2 nights alone out there. I boiled water while I listened to his story and gave Bill some aspirin from the dead man's backpack. His foot needed to be wrapped, but I don't think it's broken. We should stop splitting up, I said. He nodded and pushed his pack toward me. There was salmon and berries and some mushrooms I didn't really trust. We should think about hiking out, he said. Pick a direction and go. It's been 4 weeks. We'll only get weaker. When Ira comes back, I agreed. but Bill pursed his lips like there was something he couldn't say. What? But he only shook his head. It's been 10 days now since Ira left. September 11th. I woke up this morning to a sound I thought was a whistler, but it was actually Bill on his knees crying at Gary Law's grave. I yelled at him about it, about waking me up and making so much noise. He looked hurt and I felt bad. I'm just worried about Ira, I think, and afraid. I don't know what we'll do when the weather starts getting colder. If we wait too much longer, hiking out won't be an option. There hasn't been any sign of rescue. No planes or helicopters, no smoke. No sounds but wolf howls and the distant whistling, like elk mating calls almost. If Ira were here, he'd tell us a story to get our minds off things. He's a registered nurse. He doesn't panic. September 12th. Didn't apologize to Bill last night. He shook his head like it was nothing, so I put my hands on his shoulders and apologized again, because I needed him to really hear it. Well, I'm sorry you were alone, he said. We should never have left you alone. He was looking into my eyes so sadly, and I imagined he was remembering all of the awful things of the past weeks and feeling the same guilt I felt. It was our research that brought everyone here, our recklessness and curiosity to blame. Then he kissed me and kept kissing me, and finally I kissed him back because I was feeling something for once. Not even lust, really, more like homesickness. A little breakthrough of pain and wonder after all the bitterness and hardening and cold. We undressed each other and had sex in the tent. I don't know why. I've never cheated on Ira before. Never even thought about it. This didn't seem wrong in the moment, but now it's difficult to write down. It just felt like something we both needed. We didn't say anything at all. Afterward, he went outside to sleep by the fire, like he couldn't stand to be so close. He spent this morning hauling water and wood, barely pausing to acknowledge me. I don't think it will happen again. I don't think either of us will tell Ira. September 15, it's late. We hear whistlers. Just north of us, a chorus of them. Bill says he hears 8 distinct tones, but I don't know. It could be dozens. We put the fires out, and now we're crouched in the tent with the knives and the gun. Bill reaches for me, puts himself between me and the sound when it crescendos. I don't think he knows why he does it. I don't think it would make a difference. We won't sleep tonight. September 21st, Ira is back. His coat is in tatters and his hat is gone. He isn't speaking. I would call it shock. But he's the only one with medical training, and I don't really know what to make of him. He walks and moves fine. He doesn't look at me. Doesn't seem to see me. I feel so guilty. I'm the reason he's out here. Now every time I look up, I find Bill staring at me. He tries to communicate with looks, but all I ever make out is the fear and shame. Ira won't eat. We zipped him into the dead man's jacket and left him to sleep. But he's been shaking and mumbling all afternoon. He seems exhausted, but he hardly closes his eyes. It's my fault. September 26th, Ira hasn't improved much, although he is sleeping now and eating some. I've only seen him sick once before, food poisoning on our honeymoon. He was so stoic about it and didn't want my help. Now he hasn't got much choice. I walked about a mile north and shot a porcupine, and Bill is setting up an alder smoker so we can save the meat. He's getting serious about us hiking out, but I'm not sure how we'll manage it with Ira so sick. He made it back here, didn't he? Bill said. He'll snap out of it. Maybe so. Neither of us has speculated about what Ira saw. All we know is he was on the south side of the mountain. Bill has proposed we go west as far as the river, then follow it south. If he's right about where he thinks we are, we'll hit Red Hill before it starts to snow. There's a lodge there, and a few permanent residents, or so the helicopter pilot said. If anyone is looking for us, they've certainly asked around in Red Hill. I'm glad we have meat now. I've been feeling weak. September 30th, Ira is recovering, and not a moment too soon. I woke this morning with his arms around me, and the look in his eyes said he knew where he was, who I was, and was bursting with something he wanted to say but couldn't. It's okay, I told him. Be patient with yourself. We had a cold snap last night that left frost on the ground. All 3 of us cuddled together to sleep, Ira between Bill and I, and at one point Bill reached over to grab my shoulder. I think we're done with the awkwardness. I think we both know we were just scared. We don't have anywhere near enough food for the journey, but we're leaving tomorrow anyway. Bill has a cold edited for spacing. I'll keep going through the papers and let you know what I find. Update 3/5/2015 high all. I'm glad so many of you shared my enthusiasm about the first entries, though my enthusiasm has since twisted into something else. Yesterday, in the comments, I mentioned that I felt lucky for finding these pages at the estate sale. I don't feel lucky anymore. I feel guilty. This is going to sound crazy, but the more I read and transcribe, the more anxious I feel about the pages and the woman who wrote them. Her name is Ruth. That comes out in tonight's excerpt. I still don't know much about her. I have no leads to share about the young woman at the estate sale or her grandmother. Yet I feel like Ruth is close. Like she's aware of what I've done. Like she's angry. I can't explain it. It's as if I can hear her. Whispers of disappointment rising along with my own pulse. I'm certain now that she never meant her words to be used this way, to be posted online with so little context, offered up as entertainment. I didn't sleep well last night, still. I feel like we've started something now that needs to be finished. A few of you expressed interest in seeing Ruth's original pages, but I think that's where I should draw the line. It's where I can redeem myself. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of photographing the original documents, her original words, and turning them into just another memento mori for the internet to have its way with. At this point, it makes no difference to me if you believe me or not. I guess that might seem selfish, but you can't hear her like I can. Anyway, here's the rest of what I've transcribed so far. October 3rd, third day of walking. I wish I could talk to Lillian about what happened with Bill. She was young, ambitious, and so funny. Plus, she had a whole hoard of birth control pills. She and Jeff were dating. I forget how many you take in emergencies, and how soon after it has to be. But the pills are in her pack. And her pack is in the cave with the whistlers and whatever is left of her. She had the maps. She had everything that mattered. The cave is miles behind us now. We built a big cairn by the stream. At some point, we'll have to lead rangers out here, I'm sure. They'll want to collect Lillian and Jeff and the helicopter pilot. I can't remember his name. I hope one of us makes it out so his family can hear that it wasn't his fault. He had 3 daughters and was expecting a 4th. I can't imagine what his wife is doing now. If anyone finds this, it was an electrical malfunction. He got us to the ground safe and sound. He was perfect, even fixed the problem. But then the weather closed in and we couldn't take off. Lillian knew the way, so we hiked to the lighthouse. And then the whistlers came. October 10th, it has rained for 2 days. The dead man's jacket is nowhere near warm enough for Ira, and too big. But we don't have anything else. At least it's waterproof. We hear whistlers every night now, just after sunset. 3 or 4 of them calling back and forth. Bill is convinced they're tracking us. We stack rocks high around the fire. We're following a new game trail now, instead of the river. The walking is easier. I didn't think twice about it until last night. Bill leaned forward on his elbows at the fireside while the whistlers seemed to be circling us. "What if this isn't a game trail?" he said, his voice a low murmur. "What if they made this?" I don't have the energy to think about that. It's simple. If we're walking a trail they made, if their nightly whooping is urging us into a trap, we're fucked. Ira curls up in a ball when the whistlers start calling. He writhes like someone is sticking him with pins. All he said so far is, "Let's go." October 14th, it hailed today. Hard. We had to take shelter under a tree. And when dark fell, there were no whistles for the first time in a week. The silence was somehow more eerie than the threat of the whistlers. Ira felt it too, because about 15 minutes after dark, he stood up and started whooping and whistling out into the rain, calling and screaming in a tone that didn't sound like him. Bill yelled at him to be quiet, but he acted as if possessed, calling out to them at the top of his lungs with his eyes rolling back in his head. Bill tackled him to the ground and beat him to shut him up. "Stop it," I said at first. But when Ira didn't stop making noise, Bill looked at me, and I closed my eyes and nodded. He had to knock Ira cold to get him to be quiet, and he was sobbing while he did it, pleading with Ira to settle down. The wind was sharp, and I think it saved us. Every tree was vibrating and creaking and howling. The whistlers had likely all retreated to their caves. Maybe they hibernate. Maybe they'll leave us alone soon. October 17th, Ira was his old self this morning, as completely as if we had gone backward in time. He was up before either of us, heating water. He said he took so long to recon the south side of the mountain because the whistlers caught him in a trap. It was a hole, clearly dug with tools. He was shaking while he spoke. They only came at night, and I didn't get a good look at them. I could hear them and see silhouettes, but nothing definite. It was too dark. I don't know what they wanted with me. I got out. I climbed out, and I ran. We're well away from there now, finally reaching the end of the ridges and the start of a valley where everything is very green. I hope the change in biome means a decrease in the whistler population. Part of me wants to take steps to document as much, if it's true, but all of our field notes were lost with Lillian's gear, plus the night vision goggles and the cameras. My biggest fear is that we'll all be killed, and our disappearance will inspire some other young researchers to come up here to solve the mystery for themselves. We'll become just another line in the sick folklore that draws people to this cursed place. I would hate to be part of that cycle, knowing what I know now. The whistlers are very real, and they don't want us here. November 1st, I dreamed last night that I was pregnant with Gary Law's baby. Nothing else happened in the dream. I was hiking endlessly with Ira and Bill, and all three of us knew that I'd been with a dead man, and it bothered us, but we wouldn't talk about it. I woke up with my period, thank God. I've never been so happy doing laundry. We've made camp by a small lake in the low point of the valley. It's uphill from here to a distant saddle Ira thinks he remembers seeing from the air. It's only about 2 miles away. Red Hill should be just beyond that, Ira says, but we don't have the energy to push that far yet. We'll rest today, and tomorrow we'll move, and hopefully we'll be drinking beer at the Red Hill Lodge before dark. Ira is the best shot, so he took the gun to look for rock ptarmigan. We lit 2 fires and agreed he's not to go beyond shouting distance, but I still worry. The whistlers don't seem willing to attack when we're in a group. Lillian and Jeff were both alone when they were killed. Besides, I'm not convinced Ira is fully recovered yet. He says nonsensical things in his sleep, cries out and scratches. That's new. Bill and I went fishing after the laundry was done. It was stupid doing it in that order. All we caught were minnows, and even that took hours. He was staring at me while we sat. The cold was seeping into my bones, making me irritable. I haven't been warm in weeks. What? I said, he's not himself. You know it. He meant Ira. He's better than he was. He's okay. We'll find him a doctor in Red Hill. What if Red Hill isn't on the other side of that saddle? What if we get up there and we're facing another week's worth of empty forest? What then? I realized my eyes were closed. I opened them and the lake seemed oddly bright. Bill's fingers were pressed against his brow. We'll worry about that when we have to, I said. I'm saying I don't trust him like this, Ruth. He doesn't remember the other night, after the hail. He can't control himself. He flexed his hands. He could get us killed. He's my husband. He's my brother. I nodded, but that was all I could do. I have known Bill longer than I have known Ira, and spend more time with him most days, back at home, since we work in the same department. He introduced me to Ira at a Christmas party. 6 years ago now. What should we do? I asked. I don't know, but I think we may need to be open to the idea of cutting the rope at some point. If he gets any worse, it may come to that. Bill started rock climbing on the weekends in college. Cutting the rope. It's a metaphor for letting Ira die so we can live. November 2nd, yesterday, while Ira was still out hunting, we heard 3 shots in the woods. 2 too many to take down a rock ptarmigan, and Bill and I stood staring, tense, for just a moment before we hurried to put out the fires and pack what we could into our bags. Ira came running into camp, breathing so hard he couldn't say what was wrong. He had no gun and no bag, and he grabbed my arm as soon as he was close enough and pulled me through the grass, up the valley, toward the saddle. Bill looked alarmed. He caught up to us and pried us apart. He yelled at Ira and handed me my haphazardly stuffed pack. All our clothes were still wet, torn from the line, and Ira's eyes were wild. He stared off behind us, toward the woods he'd run from. It's a warning, he said. I understand it now. It's a warning. Bill tried to talk him down, but then we heard the whistlers' eerily musical voices. I've never heard it during daylight and never so close as this. I followed Ira's gaze into the trees and stared and listened. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't even draw breath. I held onto my pack straps with a stony grip, like it was attached to a balloon that might whisk me out of harm's way any moment. Ira took my arm again, and now Bill was helping him, pushing me along the trail until I could run, until we all were running as fast as we could. The trail led straight into the open, and we all reacted differently. ducking through alders or sweeping wide from the trail to be closer to the cover of the hemlock. Ira took the shortest path, straight through the matted grass of the game trail, and soon he was far ahead of me. And it was all I could do to keep my eyes on him and my legs moving as fast as they would go. He was the first to reach the hill covered in scrub, the saddle between two jagged peaks. He ducked low as he ran, and I lost sight of him. Bill's bad foot and pack slowed him down, and I saw him stop and crouch, wide-eyed beneath the trees. After we'd been fleeing for 10 minutes, that felt like fleeting seconds. Ira's vanishing sent panic straight to my toes. It took me no time to decide not to wait with Bill. I had to catch Ira. I kept running until I reached the ridge, my lungs burning. But once I arrived, there was no sign of him, no trail to follow. I lumbered to the crest of the saddle, clapping frantically, looking back over my shoulder for Bill, who was also gone. From so high up I could see the forest beyond, and the river, and a flat brown bay at low tide. No town, no red hill. I clapped, but neither of them clapped back. I was so exposed, but the whistling was distant now, and in fact I couldn't pick it apart from the wind with any certainty. I walked closer to the trees, and built 2 fires with my fire steel and shaking hands, the second in the open of the hilltop, big and smoky. The hemlock makes for thick cover. There was plenty of dry tinder. We left the tent behind and the sleeping pads. Bill had the stove and the cooking pots. Ira had the gun. I have the hatchet, the fire steel, the wet laundry. I made a lean-to with a small roof of boughs and sat through the evening with my back tense against a thick tree and waited and slept fitfully. I did the same today and kept the fires alive, and now it's getting dark. I should walk back down into the valley to collect the tent, but the sound of the daytime whistle is stuck in me like a splinter. I can't face the creature that made that sound, even after years of looking for it. I never believed the stories, not really. We came here to research the folklore, to listen to elderly trappers and hunters tell the outlandish stories they grew up with, to record them for posterity. We should never have come here. No sign of Ira or Bill. November 3rd, the rain came through my pine shelter last night, but at least I can say it broke me out of my trance. I tightened the hip belt on my pack, added a few hours of wood to both fires, unsheathed my knife and taped it to my hand. Bill told me to do this, a long time ago, if I knew I might have to run and fight at the same time. I'm walking back north, toward the place where I saw him fall, toward the place where the whistlers surprised us. Whistlers aren't the only things to worry about in these woods. There are bears, wolves, coyotes, fearless predators that encircle our warm camp at night. Conventional wisdom is to make noise when passing through denser growth. Avoid surprising a carnivore. Yet I have long suspected that noise lures the whistlers. Prey species don't announce themselves. They pass in stealth, after what happened to Lillian and Jeff, and recently Ira. I have no doubt that we are prey. I resolved to go quietly along the margin of the hemlock. Keeping the game trail to my right, the signal fire's smoke squarely at my back, I walked carefully, keeping low, whispering for Bill whenever the wind slowed, pausing sometimes to listen hard. After nearly an hour of creeping and murmuring fruitlessly through the trees, I lost my caution. "God damn it, Bill!" I shrieked, and seconds later his clap came. 2 shocks of sound. I clapped back, and he did too, and then I found him, damp and chilled to the bone, slumped against the base of a tall spruce tree not 30 feet from where I'd yelled. The needles where he sat were soft and dry, and I sat down right beside him, overcome. I tore the tape off my hand and held his face in my palms. His eyes were alert despite everything. "Where are you hurt?" He lifted his ankle. It was still wrapped but swollen now, risen like bread dough. It must have been fractured all along, and our sprint across the valley was the final straw. He was quiet, but grimaced as I wrestled off his sock and the inadequate wrappings. I held his foot against my thigh, feeling the mess of swollen tissue. There was deep blue bruising all across the top of his foot. He took my hands before I could do anything more. "Where is Ira?" "I smelled the smoke from your camp." I shook my head. I couldn't catch him. He didn't have a pack to weigh him down, and he's such a fast runner to begin with. He was over the ridge before me, and once I got up there he was gone. If he saw my smoke, he hasn't let on. He left you. He had no gear. I focused on the foot, knowing I would need something tight and sturdy to wrap it in, if I had any hope of moving Bill up to my camp. I took the dead man's blue wool socks from my feet. They were small for Bill, and worked like a compression bandage. I rolled both of them onto the one foot, and there were tears coming down his face before I was done. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "but you're lucky. I don't think it's broken all the way through, just badly fractured. Aira would know."